Yoko and I, when we got together, decided that whatever we did was going to be in the papers, you know, whether it's Richard or and George about a year later or something. So it's a long time we spent together in all the most extraordinary circumstances, from, you know, lousy rooms to great rooms. And so it wasn't just the public just think, oh, you were only together 5 years. We've only
Such as the Beatles,
Oh,
or
yeah.
whether you're the Rolling Stones or whoever.
We didn't break up because we weren't friends. We just broke up out of sheer boredom, you know. And boredom creates tension.
How can you get bored doing what you did?
Because it was going on, it was not going anywhere, you know. We'd stopped touring, and we'd just sort of say, time to make an album. You know?
John Lennon's name echoes through rock history as a revolutionary artist, peace activist, and outspoken icon. But while millions adored him, not everyone in the music world shared the sentiment. Behind the bright lights and screaming fans, Lennon's sharp tongue, fearless activism, and complex personality rubbed many of his peers the wrong way, creating tension with some of the biggest names in music history. From personal clashes to ideological battles, these feuds reveal the hidden fractures beneath rock's golden era, where egos clashed and legends didn't always get along. Today, we're diving deep into 6 musicians who didn't just dislike John Lennon. They outright hated him and weren't afraid to show it. Their stories unveil a different side of Lennon's legacy, one marked by rivalries, betrayals, and artistic conflicts that shaped not only his career, but the landscape of music itself. Let's see who these artists were and why Lennon got under their skin.
You see, having gone through the Beatlemania thing, nowadays it's nothing like that. I mean, I can walk down the street and somebody will say, oh, hi, John, and they usually say, how's your immigration, you know, if it's in New York, right? And they don't hassle me. I might sign 1 autograph, 2 autographs, you know?
Elvis Presley and John Lennon, 2 of the most influential musicians ever, had a meeting in 1965 that quickly turned sour. Lennon's outspoken anti-Vietnam War stance clashed with Elvis's deep patriotism, making their encounter tense. Lennon criticized the war during their meeting, noticing Elvis's pro-war decor, which instantly set the tone for years of bitterness. Elvis believed Lennon and the Beatles were corrupting America's youth with their rebellious image, long hair, and anti-establishment views. The feud escalated when Elvis met with FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, urging him to investigate Lennon and push for his deportation, accusing Lennon of contributing to moral decay and drug culture in America. This wasn't just a petty disagreement. It was a deep ideological clash that highlighted the stark differences between the king of rock and Lennon's activist spirit, turning what could have been a historic friendship into a cold war between 2 legends.
No, it was mainly parents, and they were against rock and roll, you know. Anyway, before the Beatles came along. I mean, people have been trying to stamp out rock and roll since it started.
Why do you think that is? What are they afraid of?
I always thought it was because it came from black music, and the words had a lot of double entendre in the early days. And it was sort of, you know, the white kids, our white, nice wasps are going to go crazy with all this moving their bodies. You know, and the music got to your body, and the Beatles just carried it a bit further, made it a little more white even than Elvis did, because we were English, you know. And people couldn't hear it. That's why.
John Lennon was heavily influenced by Bob Dylan's poetic, introspective songwriting, which inspired him to move beyond the Beatles' early love songs into deeper, reflective themes. But while Lennon admired Dylan, the feeling wasn't mutual. Dylan saw Lennon's stylistic shift as imitation rather than genuine artistry. Tensions peaked when Dylan released Fourth Time Around, a thinly veiled parody of Lennon's Norwegian Wood, mimicking its melody and themes with a mocking tone. Dylan even played the song for Lennon personally, leaving him visibly uncomfortable, unsure if it was a joke or a direct attack. The song highlighted Dylan's belief that Lennon was encroaching on his artistic territory without truly understanding it. While Lennon respected Dylan, The rivalry underscored how even admiration could turn sour in the competitive world of music, showcasing Lennon's vulnerability when confronted by an artist he idolized, but who didn't return the respect.
It got a little boring. I mean, it was great when it first happened. When you'd come on, there'd just be nothing but wah, you know. But then we just became like lip syncing, you know, miming, and sometimes things would break down and nobody'd know, and so it wasn't doing the music any good, you know.
When you guys were in the dress.
Steely Dan, known for their biting sarcasm and jazz rock sophistication, took aim at John Lennon's utopian ideals with their song "Only a Fool Would Say That," while Lennon's "Imagine" was praised as an anthem for peace. Steely Dan saw it as naive and hypocritical, coming from a millionaire living comfortably in a mansion while calling for a world without possessions. Their song drips with irony, suggesting that only someone disconnected from real-world struggles could believe in Lennon's dreams. Steely Dan's critique wasn't personal hate, but a rejection of what they saw as empty celebrity activism. This reflected a broader skepticism among musicians who felt Lennon's activism lacked the depth needed to create real change. The clash between Lennon's idealism and Steely Dan's realism highlighted the divide between dreamers and cynics in the music industry, showing how Lennon's messages, while inspiring to many, didn't resonate with everyone.
Such as the Beatles,
Oh,
or
yeah.
whether you're the Rolling Stones or whoever.
We didn't break up because we weren't friends. We just broke up out of sheer boredom, you know. And boredom creates tension.
How can you get bored doing what you did?
Because it was going on, it was not going anywhere, you know. We'd stop touring, and we'd just sort of say, "Time to make an album," you know. Go in the studio, and the same four of us would be looking at each other and playing the same licks.
And those silly haircuts, yeah.
Those silly haircuts that you have now. You see, notice he's got his now. And we were very good friends, and we'd known each other since we were 15, you know. And we got over all the actual fighting, the real nitty-gritty, dirty, you know, stuff, which had nothing to do with how popular we were. The same popularity, meaning Paul was always more popular than the rest of us, was going down in the dance halls in Liverpool, so it didn't come as any big surprise, you know. I mean, the kids saw him, the girls would go, "Ooh, ooh," you know, right away. So we knew where the score was there. But it was a group, it was the music that was interesting, that was important, not who was, you know, as long as we were, you know, going forward and going.
Frank Zappa and John Lennon's brief collaboration in 1971 ended in a bitter dispute that Zappa never forgot. During a jam session at the Fillmore East, Lennon and Yoko Ono joined Zappa's band for a live performance, including Zappa's piece King Kong. When Lennon later released the recording on his album, he renamed the track Jam Rag and credited it to himself and Yoko, ignoring Zappa's authorship. Zappa publicly condemned Lennon, calling it theft and a betrayal of artistic integrity. For Zappa, who prided himself on independence and fairness in the music industry, Lennon's actions were a serious breach of trust, proving that even an icon like Lennon wasn't above exploiting another artist's work for his gain. This incident highlighted a hypocrisy in Lennon's activism and public persona, adding another layer of complexity to his legacy and showing that even collaborations with Lennon could end in animosity.
Filters look funny from the side.
Do you think?
Yeah. Go on.
I don't think you look so.
No,
Look to
it's
the
not
side
bad,
again.
it's not
No,
bad.
it's not Ben.
You're just not used to seeing yourself sideways, that's what it is.
Were the Beatles before the groupies, or did you have those?
Oh, we had them, yes.
I mean, not did you have them, but were they
They didn't
around?
call them.
Well, did you have them? I guess
They
that's
were
a
great, Tom. They were
Huh?
great. They didn't call them groupies then. I've forgotten what we used to call them. Something like slags, you know.
Slags.
So there's some word they had in England for it, and yeah, I mean, one of the main reasons to get on stage is it's the quickest way of making contact, you know. And you know, you went to see those movies with Elvis or somebody in it when we were still in Liverpool, and you'd see everybody waiting to see him, right? And I'd be waiting there too, and they'd all scream when he came on the screen, right? So we thought, that's a good job.
Todd Rundgren, known for his melodic pop hits and innovative production, openly criticized John Lennon's post-Beatles activism, seeing it as a publicity stunt rather than genuine social concern. In a 1974 interview, Rundgren accused Lennon of seeking attention under the guise of revolution, dismissing his activism as self-serving. Lennon, known for his sharp tongue, didn't take this lightly and fired back in an open letter, defending his right to speak his beliefs while accusing Rundgren of projecting his frustrations. Their feud wasn't just personal. It represented a broader debate on whether musicians should use their platforms for activism. Rundgren viewed Lennon's protests as shallow, while Lennon saw his music as a tool for change. This clash illustrated the tensions between artists who believed in separating music from politics and those who saw them as inseparable, showing how Lennon's outspoken nature often created enemies among his peers.
And George about a year later or something. So it's a long time we spent together in all the most extraordinary circumstances, from lousy rooms to great rooms. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't just the public just think, oh, you were only together 5 years, we've only got 5 million records, But we were together a long, long time, and we just became stale musically.
But how are you not stale musically now, aside from changing
Because
musicians?
I'm interacting with different musicians. To me, they're musicians. They're not just, it's not like, to people, they're all stars, right? It's like having Elton John and Elvis and a few people playing, To me it isn't, it's just musicians, and to them it's the same. So if you play with the same person all the time, you get into a rut. Even if you played tennis with the same person.
It's boring.
It comes to a time when you know every move, and you have to find somebody else to play with.
As you listen to music today, I don't know if you listen to the radio a lot or if you listen mostly to records, but what are things that you see that you think are good or bad?
Well, that's pretty general. I like the disco music that's out now, which is great music. I like the thing that happened in Jamaica called reggae. There's a music in Jamaica called reggae, which has been around for years under the disguise of ska, blue beat, etc., but it finally formed itself into reggae. And that's about the really newest thing that's happened in music in the last 5 years or 6 years.
Do you think anything new happens to music, or is it a continual series of cycles, and that maybe 100,000 years ago somebody had the same kind of beat or the same kind of whatever it is that makes it different, and that maybe the whole thing is just going in cycles? Or are we in fact discovering things all the time?
I think there's something to the cycle thing, but I think if you apply the cycle idea to it, that's a cycle for everything, not just music. Mm-hmm. But it's snowballing either just because of electricity or because of all the garbage everybody picks up, because we keep inventing things, right? So it does change, and it has cycles in a way, like I think the whole whatever it is, the universe is a series of cycles. But the music has to change because they keep inventing new things, like, films change, it's now video, so it's in that way it's different.
But don't you know that in about 1988 there's going to be a group come out that is going to pick right back to the sound that you guys had in since you're 15 years old, and all kinds of critics and all kinds of writers are going to say, wow, look at this, we've got this whole new sound that's reminiscent of the Beatles back in the 60s.
Well, they'll probably be playing Grutsch blobs and Zakdungas, right? They'll have new instruments. And although rock and roll was brand new when it came out and excited everybody, it had roots in blues and jazz. So in that way, they would have their roots in the 60s, 70s, and possibly further back. But you can't say that rock and roll is like the 20s music, although if you look for it, you can find out where it came from. Mm-hmm. And you can find out where Beatles music came from, or any music came from. It's just like it has its history.
Joni Mitchell, renowned for her introspective and poetic songwriting, didn't appreciate John Lennon's unsolicited criticism of her music. Their artistic paths were different. Mitchell's layered storytelling clashed with Lennon's direct, slogan-like activism. When Lennon offered his opinions on Mitchell's work, she found it condescending, viewing him as dismissive of folk artists. Mitchell, fiercely independent and protective of her artistic integrity, later expressed her frustrations publicly, calling out Lennon's hypocrisy and flaws that many overlooked. Unlike others who idolized Lennon, Mitchell saw through his public persona, critiquing the gap between his activism and lifestyle. Their tension was a reflection of deeper artistic differences and highlighted how Lennon's habit of sharing unfiltered opinions often alienated talented peers. Mitchell's resistance to Lennon's critique showcased her commitment to authenticity, proving that even in an era of supposed peace and love, the music industry was filled with personal conflicts and unspoken rivalries.
Yoko and I, when we got together, decided that whatever we did was going to be in the papers, you know, whether it's Richard or Liz or so-and-so gets married or whatever people like us do is going to be in the papers. So we decided to utilize the space we would occupy anyway by getting married with a commercial for peace and also a theatrical event. And the theatrical event we came up with, which utilized the least energy with the maximum effect, was to work from bed. And what we virtually had was a 7-day press conference in bed, where the press fought. The first day they fought at the door to get in, thinking there was something, you know, sexy going on. And then they
Licentious.
found, that was the word I was looking for. And they found two people talking about peace, you know. And reporters always have 5 minutes with you, or 10 minutes with you. We let them ask anything for as long as they wanted for 7 days. And all the time we just kept plugging peace. And the story that came out was John and Yoko do bed in for peace. And we were just promoting peace, like you promote any product. You know, they promote war, join the Marines, join this. We were promoting peace. The Naked album cover was less general than that, meaning we didn't have. That was the one.
Many of these conflicts stemmed from the contrast between John Lennon's activism and the reality of his privileged lifestyle. While Lennon called for peace, equality, and a world without possessions in songs like Imagine, he lived in luxury, which some peers saw as hypocritical. Musicians like Steely Dan and Todd Rundgren highlighted this contradiction, questioning whether Lennon's activism was genuine or a means to maintain his relevance. Even Frank Zappa's dispute over song credit reflected a perceived disconnect between Lennon's public ideals and private actions. Lennon himself acknowledged these contradictions, admitting that his messages were aspirational rather than reflective of his lifestyle. This duality made him a polarizing figure among musicians, respected for his talent, but often criticized for what others saw as a lack of authenticity. These tensions reveal that Lennon's journey as an activist and artist was as complex and flawed as the man himself.
But you see, having gone through the Beatlemania thing, nowadays it's nothing like that. I mean, I can walk down the street and somebody just say, "Oh, hi, John," and they usually say, "How's your immigration?" You know, if it's in New York, right? And they don't hassle me. I might sign one autograph, 2 autographs, you know? And I don't get hassled. And I went through that period where I actually couldn't go anywhere. And so now it's like heaven. I can go and eat. We go and eat. We go to the movies. We go wherever we want. If there's an announcement, like there's an opening and everybody's going to be there, you get a lot of noise and cameras and flashbulbs. But if we just decide to go to dinner, it's cool, you know? We're probably less recognizable than you now, being on every night.
I doubt that.
You're on every night.
John Lennon's willingness to speak his mind on politics, war, and social issues was both his strength and his downfall in the eyes of his peers. His activism made him a target for government surveillance and criticism from fellow artists who saw his outspokenness as naive or performative. Yet, Lennon felt a responsibility to use his platform to advocate for peace, regardless of backlash. This outspokenness often led to clashes with artists like Elvis Presley, who viewed his anti-war stance as unpatriotic, or with Joni Mitchell, who saw his critiques as condescending. While Lennon's activism inspired millions, it also isolated him from artists who disagreed with his methods or message. These disputes demonstrate the risks artists face when using their platform to champion causes, showing that even within the tight-knit world of music, ideological differences can create lasting rifts, shaping how these legends viewed each other behind the scenes.
Sure. No, I mean, in the very early days when we were playing dance halls, there were just a certain type, which you call groupies now, which would be available for functions at the end of the night. And in general, most kids would just go home with their boyfriend or whatever, you know. And there was always a small group that just went for any performer. They didn't care whether it was a comedian or a Manuette glass, you know, as if it was on stage.
Right, the guy who swept up after the elephants. Hey, where are you going?
Right. And actually, the people that work for rock groups usually get more action than the actual rock group, right?
I don't say right to me because I
well,
don't know.
You can imagine it, Tom. They auditioned.
Right.
They get the cream of the crop, you know. If you want to see Elvis, you got to see me first.
Despite the feuds, John Lennon's influence on his peers was undeniable. His willingness to evolve musically and address deeper issues in his work inspired many artists, even those who criticized him. Dylan's songwriting style influenced Lennon's shift toward introspective lyrics, while Lennon's experiments in sound and activism pushed other musicians to explore new creative directions. Yet, this influence often bred tension, as artists like Dylan and Steely Dan felt Lennon borrowed too heavily from their styles without acknowledgement. The music industry is a space where inspiration can quickly turn into rivalry, and Lennon's career exemplified this dynamic. His peers respected his talent but questioned his authenticity, creating a legacy of both admiration and resentment. These tensions shaped the evolution of rock and folk music in the 60s and 70s, proving that behind every iconic song was a web of influences, rivalries, and artistic clashes that pushed music forward.
For money.
Yeah, you know what it is. It is 2 o'clock, right? We're all right.
No, you got to be kidding me. Is that one of the big reasons, the sexual aspects of singing? That's the reason most of these great dedicated
I would say that
artists
any
are on stage, that they don't care about their music, that they're just up there for a little extra?
No, but that is a good incentive for all performers. Let's not just pin down the poor musician.
And it wasn't, well, speak for yourself, John.
Well, all right. I can't speak for musicians then.
No, and please don't speak for those of us who toil in the television vineyard, because that is the farthest thing from our minds.
Of course.
Yes.
I understand that.
Now, and you say,
the news as well.
And then I could assume that when you say that going on the stage to perform music is one of the best ways of making contact, that what you're saying is it's one of the best ways of making sexual contact.
Well, yes, we're not looking to...
The stories of musicians who hated John Lennon offer a deeper look into the reality of the music industry during its golden age. Lennon's outspoken nature, activism, and strong opinions made him a divisive figure among his peers, revealing the challenges of maintaining personal beliefs while living under the spotlight. These feuds weren't just about personal differences, but about ideological conflicts, artistic integrity, and the price of fame. Lennon's willingness to challenge the status quo inspired many, but also isolated him, showing that even icons face criticism and rejection from those they admire. These conflicts remind us that legends are human, filled with contradictions and flaws, and that the music we love often comes from a place of tension and struggle. Understanding these feuds helps us see Lennon not just as a mythic figure, but as a complex artist navigating a world where ideals and reality often collide. John Lennon's legacy is a tapestry woven with groundbreaking music, bold activism, and a fair share of controversy. While millions saw him as a voice for peace and change, these stories of musicians who clashed with him reveal a different side. A man unafraid to speak out, yet often blind to how his words and actions impacted those around him. Whether it was Elvis Presley's political disagreements, Bob Dylan's quiet rivalry, or Frank Zappa's accusations of theft, each feud paints a fuller picture of who Lennon was and the world he lived in. These tensions shaped the music and messages of a generation, showing that even icons are not immune to criticism and conflict. What do you think about these feuds and Lennon's complex legacy? Let us know in the comments. Like and subscribe for more deep dives into music history. And we'll see you in the next video, exploring the stories behind the legends.